The grand ballroom of the Grand Horizon Hotel in downtown Chicago, Illinois, shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers that dangled like frozen stars from the high vaulted ceiling, casting a warm golden light over the polished marble floors that gleamed with the reflections of elegant gowns and tailored tuxedos swirling in a dance of opulence on this crisp autumn evening in 2025, where the city's elite had gathered for the annual Whitaker Foundation Charity Gala. An event known not just for its lavish displays of wealth, but for the undercurrent of networking and one-upmanship that buzzed through the air like the hum of expensive champagne flutes, clinking in toasts to fortunes made and deals sealed. And amid this sea of affluence stood Lily Harper, a tiny 8-year-old girl with wide hazel eyes that held a wisdom far beyond her years, her small frame clad in a faded blue dress that had seen better days, its hems frayed from too many washes in the communal laundry of the foster home on the South Side, where she had been bouncing around like a forgotten parcel for the past 5 years since her parents' tragic car accident on the icy roads of Interstate 90 one fateful winter night, when she was barely 3, leaving her with fragmented memories of warmth and laughter that she clung to like lifelines in the cold reality of a system that promised care, but often delivered indifference. Her scuffed black shoes, a hand-me-down from another child who had long since moved on, squeaked faintly against the floor as she shifted her weight nervously, clutching a worn violin case that she had smuggled in under her arm after sneaking through the service entrance earlier that evening, drawn irresistibly to the sounds of live music drifting from the ballroom like a siren's call for music. Was Lily's secret world, her escape from the endless cycle of temporary homes where foster parents viewed her as just another mouth to feed or a checkbox on a subsidy form. And it all began 2 years ago in the dingy basement of St. Mary's Orphanage on West 47th Street, where she had stumbled upon an old violin tucked away in a dusty storage room amid broken toys and outdated textbooks. Its strings slack and body scratched, but still capable of producing notes that resonated deep within her soul. When she tentatively plucked them, teaching herself through trial and error in stolen moments, after lights out, her fingers blistering at first, but gradually finding their way to melodies that poured out her unspoken grief and unspoken dreams, melodies she composed in her head during long bus rides across the city, or while staring out the window at the towering skyscrapers that seemed so unreachable. And now, here she was, an uninvited intruder in this glittering realm, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest as she hid in the shadows near the grand stage where a professional string quartet had just finished their set, to polite applause from the crowd of philanthropists, investors, and socialites who milled about with glasses of vintage wine in hand, their conversations laced with references to stock portfolios and vacation homes in the Hamptons, oblivious to the little girl who watched them with a mixture of awe and envy, wishing for just a taste of the stability they took for granted. But fate had other plans. As James Whitaker, the evening's host, and a towering figure in the tech world, founder of Whitaker Innovations, which had revolutionized AI-driven logistics and amassed him a fortune north of $10 billion, spotted her from across the room with his sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, his 6'3" frame cutting an imposing silhouette in a bespoke navy suit, tailored in Milan, his salt and pepper hair perfectly coiffed, and his jaw set in the confident line of a man who had clawed his way from a modest upbringing in the suburbs of Evanston to the pinnacle of Silicon Valley influence, though Chicago remained his base of operations, a city he claimed as his own, with buildings bearing his name, and scholarships funded in his honor. Yet, beneath the veneer of success, lurked a profound loneliness, a void left by the loss of his younger sister Emily, 20 years prior to a rare illness that no amount of money could cure, a loss that had hardened him into a cynic who viewed vulnerability as a weakness and kindness as a transaction. And tonight, buoyed by a few too many scotches and the adoring gaze of his guests, he saw Lily not as a child in need, but as an opportunity for amusement, striding over with a glass in hand, and a smirk playing on his lips as he addressed the crowd that naturally parted for him like the Red Sea, his voice booming over the ambient chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have a little stowaway in our midst. Look at this urchin with her toy violin, probably dreaming of stardom, while the rest of us fund real charities." And the room erupted in chuckles, a ripple of laughter that stung Lily like needles as eyes turned toward her, some pitying, others mocking. But James wasn't done, leaning down slightly with exaggerated theatrics, his cologne, a sharp scent of sandalwood and citrus, wafting over her as he said directly to her face, "Tell you what, kid, if you can play something on that fiddle of yours that truly blows me away, I'll adopt you right here and now, give you the life of luxury you've been peeking at from the shadows." His words dripping with sarcasm, intended as a jest to entertain his peers, who laughed even harder, clapping him on the back, as if it were the wittiest quip of the evening. But to Lily, those words were no joke. They were a spark of hope in her darkened world, a chance at the family she had prayed for in whispered pleas under thin blankets. And though her hands trembled as she opened the violin case, revealing the instrument that had become her closest companion, scarred and imperfect like herself, she rosined the bow with deliberate care, her mind racing through the fears that threatened to overwhelm her. The fear of failure, of rejection, of being laughed out of the room, back to the uncertainty of foster care, where caseworkers shuffled paperwork and promises rarely materialized, yet deep inside burned a quiet determination forged in adversity. The same fire that had kept her practicing in secret, despite scoldings from foster siblings who called her weird, or the times when hunger gnawed at her belly because meals were sparse. And as she tucked the violin under her chin, the wood warm against her skin, she glanced up at James, seeing not just the arrogant billionaire, but a man whose eyes held a flicker of something unspoken, perhaps boredom or challenge, and the crowd hushed in anticipation of what they assumed would be a comical flop, whispers circulating about how adorable yet pathetic it was. But Lily closed her eyes for a moment, drawing in a deep breath that carried the faint scent of floral arrangements dotting the tables laden with gourmet hors d'oeuvres she could only dream of tasting. And then she began to play her bow drawing across the strings in a tentative start, a single note hanging in the air like a question, wavering slightly as nerves gripped her, eliciting a snicker from someone in the back. But she pushed through, letting the music build from her core, a melody born not from formal lessons, but from the raw ache of loss, and the fragile bloom of hope notes, cascading like a gentle rain over the parched earth of her experiences, weaving tales of lonely nights in group homes where bedtime stories were replaced by the sounds of distant sirens on Chicago's bustling streets, of birthdays forgotten, amid bureaucratic oversights of small joys like finding a discarded music book in a library on Michigan Avenue that she pored over by flashlight. And as the tempo quickened, her small fingers dancing with surprising agility, despite the lack of polish, the room began to shift, the initial amusement fading into a curious silence as the purity of her expression pierced through the cynicism. Her body swaying instinctively with the rhythm, eyes still shut, as if the world beyond her music had ceased to exist, and James, who had retreated to a nearby chair with a smug grin, found his expression faltering, the notes stirring memories he had long suppressed of Emily playing her violin in their childhood home, her laughter filling the modest living room before illness stole her away, leaving him to bury his grief under layers of ambition and isolation, building an empire that isolated him further from genuine connections. His marriages, failing his friendships, superficial, and now this child's impromptu performance was cracking. That armor, each crescendo pulling at threads he thought unbreakable, the crowd murmuring in surprise, as the melody evolved into something profound. A story told without words of resilience in the face of abandonment of dreams clinging to life like ivy, on the brick walls of abandoned buildings in the Loop, and Lily poured everything into it, sweat beading on her forehead under the bright lights, her heart racing, but her focus unyielding, determined to turn this mocking challenge into a doorway, unaware that in this moment she was not just playing for adoption, but for the awakening of souls. In a room full of jaded hearts, the chandeliers above seeming to sparkle brighter, as if in harmony with her strings, the marble floors echoing the vibrations subtly, and as the piece reached its emotional peak, a haunting refrain that spoke of unspoken longings, James leaned forward, his scotch forgotten on the table, his eyes locked on the little girl who had dared to stand before him. Her music a mirror reflecting his own hidden voids. And though the chapter of this evening was just beginning, the tension hung thick in the air, a mix of hope flickering in Lily's resolve and skepticism lingering in the onlookers' gazes, setting the stage for a transformation neither could yet foresee. But in that instant, as her bow drew the final notes of this opening salvo, the ballroom held its breath, waiting for what would come next, in this unexpected symphony of fate, and Lily, opening her eyes, at last, met James's gaze with a quiet defiance that belied her age. Her violin still humming faintly in her hands, the challenge accepted, and the game forever changed. For in the heart of Chicago's glittering facade, a true connection was beginning to form. One note at a time, weaving through the opulence and touching the raw humanity beneath, promising a story of redemption that would unfold in ways no one in that room could predict. Yet all would remember, as the night when a child's courage silenced the mighty, and the seeds of family were sown in the most unlikely soil, with the city's skyline twinkling outside the floor-to-ceiling windows like a backdrop to this personal drama. The wind off Lake Michigan, whispering secrets through the cracks, and Lily standing there, small but unbreakable, ready for whatever came next in her young life, that had already seen too much hardship, but held on to hope. Like a precious melody, she refused to let fade away her journey from the shadows into the light, just commencing under the watchful eyes of strangers who might soon become something more. As James pondered his impulsive words, the weight of them settling in like an uninvited guest at his own gala, challenging him to live up to the man he pretended to be, or perhaps to become the man he had forgotten he could be, all sparked by the unassuming talent of a girl named Lily Harper, whose violin spoke volumes where words failed, echoing through the Grand Horizon Hotel and into the hearts of those present on that memorable evening in 2025, where charity took on a new meaning far beyond the checks written and the auctions won, delving into the realm of human compassion and the unexpected bonds that can form when least expected, setting the tone for the chapters to follow in this tale of hope, challenge, and ultimate healing that would resonate long after the music stopped. But for now, the first movement had concluded, leaving an indelible mark on all who witnessed it, a testament to the power of music to bridge divides and ignite change in even the most fortified souls. And as the applause tentatively began, scattered at first, then building, Lily lowered her violin, her chest heaving with effort and emotion, wondering if this was the start of her second chance, or just another fleeting dream in the windy city that had both broken and shaped her young spirit. While James sat back, his mind racing with possibilities he hadn't considered in years. The gala's challenge evolving from jest to genuine turning point, in a single unforgettable performance that would alter the course of two lives forever. Intertwined, from that moment onward, the opulent surroundings fading into the background as the true story began to unfold in the quiet spaces between notes and glances, promising a narrative rich with growth, struggle, and the enduring light of kindness. In a world often too busy to notice the quiet heroes among us, like little Lily, with her violin standing tall in a room of giants, her music, a beacon that cut through the noise and touched the essence of what it means to be human, vulnerable, and open to the unexpected gifts life can offer when we least expect them. And so the evening pressed on. But nothing would be the same again in the Grand Horizon Hotel's ballroom, where laughter had given way to contemplation, and a challenge issued in mockery had blossomed into the first step of a profound journey for both the billionaire and the orphan girl who dared to play her heart out under the chandelier's glow. Her small hands still tingling from the strings, her eyes bright with a mix of fear and triumph, ready for the next chapter in her unfolding story, amidst the vibrant pulse of Chicago, Illinois. As the final notes of Lily's tentative opening lingered in the opulent ballroom of the Grand Horizon Hotel in Chicago, Illinois, a hush fell over the crowd that was part awkward anticipation and part lingering amusement from James Whittaker's mocking challenge. But Lily Harper, the 8-year-old orphan with her violin tucked firmly under her chin like a shield against the world's cruelties, felt a surge of resolve bubbling up from the depths of her soul. Her hazel eyes fluttering shut once more to block out the sea of judgmental faces, illuminated by the golden chandeliers overhead, their crystals twinkling like distant stars mocking her earthly struggles. And in that inner world she retreated to a sanctuary built from fragments of memory and imagination. She envisioned not the glittering gala, but the quiet corners of her past foster homes, the creaky wooden floors of a brownstone on South Halsted Street, where she had first learned to hide her tears behind melodies, or the drafty attic in a suburban house in Oak Park, where moonlight filtered through cracked windows to guide her bow during sleepless nights haunted by dreams of her lost parents. Their faces fading like old photographs, but their love etched into her heart like an indelible score. And with that vision anchoring her, she drew the bow across the strings again, this time with a steadier hand. The notes emerging not as stumbles, but as a deliberate whisper, a soft lament that spoke of abandonment in the windy city's unforgiving streets, where winter winds off Lake Michigan bit through thin coats and summer heat waves turned playgrounds into mirages of relief. She rarely found her music weaving a tapestry of loneliness that started slow and melancholic, each vibrato trembling like the fear she carried in her small chest, but gradually building into a haunting melody that captured the essence of her dreams, dreams of a home with warm meals on the table. Instead of cafeteria lines at overcrowded shelters of bedtime stories read by someone who cared, rather than the indifferent drone of television sets in group homes. And as the tempo swelled, her fingers flew with an intuitive grace honed from countless hours of self-taught practice in hidden spots, like the abandoned lots near the Chicago River, where she would play to the rhythm of passing trains. The violin's voice, rising to fill the vast ballroom, echoing off the marble pillars and velvet drapes that framed the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the twinkling lights of the Loop's skyscrapers, the John Hancock Center and Willis Tower standing sentinel in the night, like guardians of the city's secrets, and the crowd who had begun with smirks and whispered jabs about the street kids' folly found their laughter dying in their throats, replaced by a creeping silence that spread like a puer rolling in from the lake. One socialite in a sparkling emerald gown, pausing mid-sip of her champagne, her perfectly manicured hand frozen as the melody tugged at forgotten sorrows of her own privileged yet empty life. Another investor, loosening his tie, as if the notes were loosening the knots in his soul, and James Whittaker seated in his throne-like chair at the front, his initial smirk fading into a furrowed brow, felt an unwelcome stir in his chest. The music piercing through the fortress he had built around his heart since losing his sister Emily, who had been a prodigy on the violin herself back in their modest Evanston home. Her fingers dancing across the strings with a joy that lit up their childhood, until leukemia claimed her at just 16, leaving James to channel his grief into ruthless ambition, climbing the corporate ladder at Whittaker Innovations by outmaneuvering rivals and burying emotions under boardroom victories and billion-dollar acquisitions. But now, as Lily's performance deepened into a crescendo of raw emotion, her small body swaying as if possessed by the spirit of every overlooked child in the foster system, from the bustling halls of the Department of Children and Family Services on West Randolph Street to the quiet despair of temporary placements in neighborhoods like Englewood or Pilsen. Her notes evoked Emily's final recital, a memory James had locked away in the vault of his penthouse overlooking Millennium Park, where he spent evenings alone with spreadsheets and scotch, convincing himself that solitude was strength. Yet here was this urchin, this Lily Harper, with her scuffed shoes and frayed dress unraveling him, note by note, her melody shifting from sorrow to a fragile hope, incorporating improvisations that mimicked the city's pulse. The honk of taxis on Michigan Avenue, the roar of the L train overhead, the gentle lap of waves at Navy Pier, where she had once busked for spare change on a borrowed instrument, hoping for enough to buy a hot dog from a vendor who pitied her wide eyes, and the room transformed the opulence, fading into irrelevance as the music became the focal point. Guests exchanging glances of genuine awe. A tech mogul in the back wiping a discreet tear as it reminded him of his own estranged daughter, lost to custody battles amid his rise to fame. A philanthropist clutching her pearls, not in disdain, but in empathy for the vulnerability laid bare on stage, and Lily, lost in her inner world, poured out her story without words. The violin singing of resilience forged in the fire of rejection, like the time a foster family returned her after just 3 months because she didn't fit in with their biological kids, or the holidays spent alone in a group home while others went to relatives, her only companion, the faint radio tunes drifting from the kitchen. But through it all, music had been her anchor, a language that transcended her youth and inexperience, and now it bridged the chasm between her and this elite crowd, forcing them to confront the humanity they often ignored in their pursuit of status. James's hands clenching the arms of his chair as the melody hit a poignant refrain echoing Emily's favorite piece, a Bach partita she had played flawlessly before her strength waned, and for the first time in decades he felt the sting of tears pricking his eyes, his mind flashing to the hospital room in Northwestern Memorial, where he had held her hand as she whispered her last dreams of performing at Symphony Center. Dreams cut short that fueled his drive, but also his isolation, building an empire that spanned from Silicon Valley partnerships to Chicago's tech hubs in River North, yet leaving him with no one to share it with. His ex-wives, citing his emotional unavailability, his friends, mere acquaintances at galas like this. And as Lily's performance reached its emotional apex, a soaring adagio that blended pain with promise, her bow vibrating with intensity that belied her size. The silence in the ballroom was profound, broken only by the occasional sniffle or shifted foot, the chandelier's light seeming softer, more forgiving, as if the music had dimmed the harsh edges of reality. And when the final note faded into the ether, hanging like a promise unspoken, Lily opened her eyes to a room transformed no longer mocking, but mesmerized, her chest rising and falling with the effort of baring her soul. Sweat glistening on her forehead under the spotlights that now felt like warm embraces rather than interrogations. And James Whittaker rose slowly from his seat, his face a mask of conflicted emotions, shock, regret, and a dawning empathy that cracked his arrogant facade like fissures in a once impenetrable wall. The crowd erupting into applause that started hesitant but built into a thunderous ovation. Guests standing one by one in a standing ovation that rippled through the ballroom. But James barely registered it, his gaze locked on Lily, who stood there vulnerable yet triumphant. Her violin lowered, but her spirit elevated, realizing in that moment that her music had not just met the challenge, but shattered expectations, stirring buried emotions in a man who had forgotten how to feel, forcing him to confront the isolation of his wealth-hoarded life amid Chicago's vibrant yet divided landscape, where fortunes rose like the skyline, but hearts often remained grounded in shadows. And as the applause swelled, Lily met his eyes with a quiet intensity, her inner world spilling into the real one, the music having spoken volumes where words could not, bridging divides of class, age, and experience in a single haunting performance that would linger in the minds of all present long after the gala ended, marking the shift from mockery to awe, from stranger to potential savior, as the emotional power of her art connected souls across the vast expanse of human experience, setting the stage for a confrontation with buried pasts and unspoken futures in the heart of the Windy City, where one girl's vulnerability had ignited the first sparks of empathy in a room full of hardened hearts, the melody echoing faintly in the air like a ghost of possibilities yet to unfold, drawing James closer to the stage. Despite himself, his steps heavy with the weight of realization that this was no longer a joke, but a profound turning point. The music having peeled back layers he thought impenetrable, revealing the cracks of loneliness beneath his billionaire armor, and Lily, sensing the change in the atmosphere, allowed a small smile to tug at her lips, her dreams no longer just whispers in the night, but a tangible hope blooming under the chandelier's glow. The city's lights outside twinkling in approval, as if the entire metropolis bore witness to this intimate revolution of the heart, where a child's raw talent had silenced skepticism and awakened dormant compassion, promising that the story was far from over, but irrevocably altered by the language of music that needed no translation, touching the essence of what it means to be truly alive and connected, in a world too often divided by walls of wealth and circumstance. The applause continuing as a chorus of affirmation for the little girl who had dared to speak through strings and bow her performance, a beacon in the opulent night that illuminated paths forward for both herself and the man who had unwittingly opened the door to change all within the grand confines of the Grand Horizon Hotel, where fates intertwined on that unforgettable evening in 2025. The emotional introspection giving way to a collective awe that would ripple outward, challenging each listener to reflect on their own hidden vulnerabilities and the power of art to heal and unite. Lily's music, lingering like an afterimage, a haunting reminder that true connection often begins in the most unexpected moments of courage and openness. In the days following the electrifying performance at the Grand Horizon Hotel in downtown Chicago, Illinois, where Lily Harper's violin had silenced a room full of skeptics and cracked open the armored heart of tech billionaire James Whittaker, the opulent gala's glow faded into the gritty reality of the city's quieter streets, where autumn leaves skittered along sidewalks cracked from years of harsh winters, and the distant rumble of the L train overhead served as a constant reminder of life's relentless pace. And James, still reeling from the emotional ambush of Lily's music that had dredged up memories of his late sister Emily, like ghosts from the depths of Lake Michigan, found himself pacing the sleek marble floors of his penthouse atop a luxury high-rise in the Gold Coast neighborhood. The floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the glittering skyline, punctuated by the iconic spires of the Wrigley Building and the Tribune Tower. But his mind was far from the empire he had built through Whitaker Innovations' groundbreaking AI logistics software that powered supply chains across the globe, from warehouses in the West Loop to international hubs instead, fixated on the small girl with the frayed dress and unyielding spirit who had turned his flippant challenge into a mirror, reflecting his own isolation, prompting him to make a call the very next morning to his high-powered attorney, a sharp-suited woman named Rebecca Klein from a Loop firm specializing in family law, instructing her to initiate the adoption process despite the raised eyebrows and cautious warnings about the complexities involved. Background checks, home studies, court approvals, and the bureaucratic maze of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, headquartered on West Randolph Street, where overworked caseworkers juggled caseloads of vulnerable kids like Lily, who had been in the system since that fateful car crash on I-90 5 years ago, bouncing from foster home to foster home in neighborhoods like Humboldt Park and Little Village, each placement a temporary bandage over the wound of loss. And James, unaccustomed to anything but swift corporate victories, chafed at the delays, his initial enthusiasm tempered by skepticism from social workers who viewed him as just another wealthy eccentric seeking a publicity stunt. One particularly stern evaluator named Maria Gonzalez from the DCFS office, grilling him during a home visit about his long hours at the office overlooking Grant Park, his history of failed relationships, and whether a man who had built his life on algorithms and acquisitions could truly provide the emotional stability a traumatized child needed. Her notes scribbled furiously on a clipboard as she toured the penthouse's minimalist decor, white leather sofas, abstract art from galleries on Superior Street, and a state-of-the-art kitchen rarely used beyond takeout from nearby Michelin-starred spots like Alinea, pointing out the absence of child-friendly spaces amid the sharp edges and sterile luxury, forcing James to confront his doubts in the quiet hours after she left, staring at his reflection in the window as the city lights twinkled below like a sea of possibilities he had never fully embraced, wondering if he was equipped to be a father when his own upbringing in Evanston had been marked by distant parents, more focused on scraping by than nurturing dreams. A void Emily's music had once filled until her illness shattered everything, leaving him to forge ahead alone. But the image of Lily's determined eyes and the haunting echo of her melody propelled him forward, leading to the first supervised visit at a neutral ground, a cozy coffee shop in Lincoln Park, where the aroma of fresh brewed espresso mingled with the scent of falling leaves outside. And Lily arrived escorted by her current foster mother, a kind but exhausted woman named Carla. From a modest bungalow on North Kedzie Avenue, Lily's small hands fidgeting with the strap of her backpack that held her violin like a talisman, her hazel eyes wary beneath tousled brown hair as she sat across from James in a booth, the initial silence thick with unspoken fears. Her past rejections flashing through her mind like scenes from a bad movie, the family in Oak Park, who sent her back because she cried too much at night, the group home in Englewood, where older kids teased her for practicing violin instead of playing video games, each experience layering distrust like coats of paint over her vulnerable heart. And James, sensing her hesitation, fumbled through small talk about the weather and the Cubs' latest season at Wrigley Field, his usual boardroom charisma faltering in the face of genuine connection, until he tentatively asked about her music, prompting Lily to unclasp her case and show him the instrument's worn varnish, explaining in a soft voice how she had found it in a thrift shop on Milwaukee Avenue for just $10, scavenged from bottle returns, teaching herself by ear from YouTube videos sneaked on library computers downtown. And as she demonstrated a simple scale, her fingers nimble despite the nerves, James felt a spark of warmth suggesting they move to his penthouse for proper lessons. A proposal that cleared the initial hurdles after paperwork shuffled through the courts, and over the ensuing weeks, as Chicago transitioned from the crisp fall air to the first flurries of snow blanketing Millennium Park's Cloud Gate sculpture, like a mirror to the soul, their bond began to tentatively form amid the challenges of adjustment. Lily, moving into a hastily prepared guest room in the penthouse, its walls repainted in soft blues and furnished with a child-sized bed from a store on North Michigan Avenue. Though she slept fitfully at first, haunted by nightmares of being uprooted again, waking to the unfamiliar hum of the building's elevator, instead of the familiar chaos of foster siblings, and James juggling conference calls with investors in Silicon Valley and board meetings in River North, carved out time for music sessions in the spacious living room where he had installed a professional violin stand and even hired a tutor from the Chicago Symphony Orchestra based at Symphony Center. But the real magic happened in the unscripted moments when the tutor was absent. James awkwardly attempting to hold the violin himself under Lily's patient guidance, his large hands fumbling the bow like a novice coder, debugging his first program, eliciting giggles from Lily as he produced screeching notes that echoed off the high ceilings. "You're holding it too tight, Mr. Whitaker, like it's a business deal you don't want to lose," she teased in her innocent way, her laughter a rare melody that lightened the room more than any chandelier. And James, chuckling, despite the embarrassment, persisted, sharing stories of Emily's prowess to bridge the gap, describing how she would play Vivaldi's Four Seasons while he pretended to conduct with a spoon from their kitchen table in Evanston. These anecdotes drawing Lily out of her shell, as she reciprocated with tales of her own makeshift concerts for stray cats in alleyways behind her old foster homes. Their sessions evolving into playful duets, where James's clumsy attempts provided comic relief, like the time he accidentally snapped a string, sending them both into fits of laughter that dissolved the tension of the day. And amid these light-hearted connections, deeper growth emerged, Lily grappling with trust issues during therapy sessions mandated by the adoption process at a clinic on East Wacker Drive, where a gentle counselor named Dr. Ellis helped her unpack the scars of abandonment, encouraging her to voice fears that James might tire of her like others had, while James faced his own insecurities in private reflections during late-night walks along the Chicago Riverwalk, admitting to himself that fatherhood demanded vulnerability. He had long avoided pushing him to scale back work hours, delegating tasks at Whitaker Innovations, to spend afternoons exploring the city with Lily, visits to the Art Institute where they marveled at Picasso's works, picnics in Lincoln Park Zoo, watching the lions prowl, or ice skating at the Maggie Daley Park rink as snowflakes danced around them, each outing chipping away at the walls between them, though not without setbacks. Like the argument when Lily hid her violin after a bad day at her new school in the near North Side, feeling out of place among privileged classmates, accusing James of only wanting her for show, her words stinging like the winter wind. But he responded not with defensiveness, but with patience, sitting on the floor beside her bed to listen, sharing his own stories of feeling like an outsider in boardrooms early in his career, forging a tentative understanding that mended the rift. And as weeks turned into months, the adoption papers inched closer to finalization. Despite bureaucratic snags, including a court hearing at the Daley Center, where a judge scrutinized James's lifestyle, but was swayed by glowing reports from social workers noting the budding bond, Lily's grades improving at school, and her confidence blooming like spring flowers in Grant Park. Their relationship a testament to the slow, messy work of building family, not through blood, but through choice and perseverance. Moments of humor like James burning dinner in an attempt to cook spaghetti, leading to a pizza delivery, and shared jokes about his culinary disasters, interwoven with heartfelt conversations under the penthouse stars. Visible through the skylight on clear nights, where Lily whispered her dreams of performing at Ravinia Festival someday, and James promised to support her, his own healing evident in the way he began reaching out to old friends, and even donating anonymously to music programs in underfunded schools across the South Side. Recognizing that true wealth lay in connections rather than accounts, the challenges of trust and adjustment yielding to a hopeful realism that painted their new beginning in shades of warmth. Amid Chicago's enduring spirit, where quieter streets held stories of resilience just like theirs. The penthouse no longer a solitary fortress, but a home, echoing with laughter and music, fostering growth in both the billionaire who had learned to open his heart and the orphan girl who had found the courage to believe in second chances. Their journey a mosaic of fears navigated and insecurities confronted, paving the way for a bond that grew stronger with each passing day in the vibrant, windy heart of Illinois, where unexpected families could bloom from the seeds of a single transformative melody. A year had passed since that transformative night at the Grand Horizon Hotel in downtown Chicago, Illinois, where a little orphan girl's violin had shattered the facade of a billionaire's indifference. And now, on a warm spring evening in 2026, the modest auditorium of the South Side Community Center on East 79th Street buzzed with the quiet energy of families and locals gathering for a youth recital organized by a nonprofit dedicated to arts education in underserved neighborhoods. The room a far cry from the opulent ballrooms of the elite, with its folding chairs arranged in neat rows, fluorescent lights, casting a soft glow over posters of famous musicians tacked to cinder block walls, painted in cheerful murals of cityscapes and musical notes, and the air carrying the faint scent of fresh popcorn from a concession stand run by volunteers to fund scholarships for kids like Lily Harper, who at 9 years old had blossomed from a wary foster child into a confident young performer, her hazel eyes sparkling with excitement rather than fear as she adjusted the strap of her now polished violin backstage, a gift from James Whitaker, upgraded from her old thrift shop, Find, its varnish gleaming under the stage lights like a symbol of her new life. The past 12 months, a whirlwind of growth and healing in the penthouse overlooking Millennium Park, where routines had solidified into the comforting rhythms of family morning breakfasts, of pancakes James had learned to make, without burning after-school violin practices that evolved into jam sessions with him clumsily accompanying on a beginner's instrument he bought on a whim from a shop on Wabash Avenue, evening walks along the lakefront trail where they shared stories under the setting sun, reflecting off Lake Michigan's waves, and therapy sessions that continued at Dr. Ellis's clinic, helping Lily process the lingering shadows of abandonment, while James confronted his grief over Emily, turning what could have been a superficial adoption into a profound bond built on mutual vulnerability and support. Their journey not without its storms, like the time Lily had a meltdown over a school project, reminding her of lost parents, or when James's work stress led to a cancelled outing, but each challenge met with open communication and forgiveness, strengthening their connection, like roots deepening in Chicago's fertile soil. And tonight's recital marked a milestone. Lily's first public performance since the gala, chosen deliberately at this community center to give back to the world that had once overlooked her, inviting kids from her old foster homes and donating proceeds from James's foundation to expand the music program, a full-circle moment that underscored the transformative power of compassion. As James sat in the front row, his once imposing frame relaxed in a casual button-down shirt instead of a suit, his blue eyes filled with paternal pride rather than corporate calculation, surrounded by a mix of locals in jeans and T-shirts, a stark contrast to the tuxedoed crowd of yesteryear chatting amiably with a neighbor about the Cubs' spring training prospects at Wrigley Field while glancing at his watch, eager for Lily's turn on the program that featured young talents from across the city, piano prodigies from Pilsen, drummers from Englewood, singers from Humboldt Park, all united in a celebration of resilience through art. And when the MC, an enthusiastic teacher named Ms. Ramirez from a local high school, announced Lily Harper to the stage, the applause rippled through the auditorium like a gentle wave. James's claps the loudest as she stepped out in a simple sundress bought from a boutique on North Michigan Avenue. Her hair tied back with a ribbon violin in hand and a determined smile on her face that belied the butterflies in her stomach. But unlike that fateful gala, there was no mockery here, only encouragement from an audience who understood struggle, many having walked paths similar to hers in Chicago's diverse tapestry of neighborhoods, where dreams persisted despite odds. And Lily began her set with a lively piece by Mozart, her bow dancing across the strings with precision honed from lessons at the Merritt School of Music downtown, notes filling the room with joy that had the crowd tapping feet and nodding heads. Her confidence evident in the way she engaged the audience with glances and smiles. A far cry from the closed-eyed retreat of before, transitioning seamlessly into a medley of folk tunes inspired by the city's blues heritage from venues like Buddy Guy's Legends on South Wabash, incorporating improvisations that echoed the L Train's rhythm and the street performers at Navy Pier, drawing cheers and whoops from the younger attendees. But the emotional pinnacle came when she paused microphone in hand to dedicate her final piece, a poignant original composition she had written over the winter months to the memory of Emily Whitaker, who taught us that music lives on in our hearts. Her voice steady as she explained briefly how learning about James's sister had inspired her to blend classical elements with personal storytelling, the audience falling into a respectful hush as James's breath caught in his throat, his eyes misting over at the unexpected tribute that hit like a warm embrace, reconciling him further with the past he had buried under Whitaker Innovations' skyscraper offices in the Loop, where boardrooms once echoed with deals, but now included family photos on his desk. And as Lily played the melody, a tender elegy that wove themes of loss with threads of hope, notes rising like the city's skyline at dawn, evoking Emily's spirit in every vibrato and crescendo, the community center transforming into a sacred space where grief met grace, audience members dabbing eyes as the music touched universal chords of healing. James, feeling a profound release, the weight of years lifting as if the violin strings were unraveling his lingering sorrow, allowing him to fully embrace the present. With Lily, who poured her soul into the performance not just for applause, but to honor the man who had become her father. In every sense, the piece building to a triumphant resolution that symbolized new beginnings, like spring blooms in Grant Park after a long Chicago winter. And when the last note faded, the auditorium erupted in a standing ovation, cheers and whistles filling the air as Lily bowed graciously, her cheeks flushed with accomplishment, James rising to his feet, with tears streaming unashamedly, clapping until his hands ached. The bond between them unbreakable, now forged in the fires of shared vulnerability and tempered by time. And as the recital wrapped up with group photos and hugs from well-wishers, including former foster siblings who marveled at her glow, James and Lily stepped outside into the evening twilight, the South Side streets alive with the sounds of kids playing basketball on nearby courts, and the distant hum of traffic on the Dan Ryan Expressway, walking hand in hand toward their car, parked under streetlights flickering to life, reflecting on the evening's magic. James pulling her into a hug and whispering, "You didn't just play tonight, kid. You healed us all." His voice thick with emotion, and Lily, hugging back tightly, replied, "We healed each other, Dad." The word dad, now natural after the adoption finalized 6 months prior in a quiet ceremony at the Daily Center, marking the official start of their family, but really just affirming what had already grown organically, and in that moment, as they drove home through the city's vibrant arteries, passing landmarks like the Field Museum and Soldier Field, bathed in golden dusk. The story of their journey crystallized into a powerful lesson that compassion and openness can indeed heal broken hearts and create new families where none seemed possible, teaching that looking beyond appearances like James did after that gala challenge and offering second chances as Lily accepted, despite her fears, unlocks the potential for profound change in ourselves and others, encouraging everyone to practice kindness in daily life, whether through a simple smile to a stranger on the bustling Magnificent Mile, or volunteering at community centers like the one they just left. Because no act of empathy is too small to spark transformation, as evidenced by how a mocking jest evolved into a lifelong bond that not only redeemed a lonely billionaire, but empowered a forgotten child to shine, reminding us all that in a world often divided by wealth, circumstance, and past pains, belief in the goodness of others and the courage to connect can rewrite destinies, fostering resilience and joy that echoes far beyond one family's tale into the broader fabric of society, where stories like theirs inspire action, donating to arts programs, mentoring youth in foster care through organizations like Big Brothers, Big Sisters in Chicago, or simply listening with an open heart to those around us. For the true lesson of love is that it multiplies when shared, healing wounds we didn't know we carried, and building bridges across divides we thought insurmountable, just as Lily's music did that night and every day since. A melody of hope that continues to play in the Windy City's soul, urging listeners everywhere to embrace vulnerability, extend grace, and recognize that every person we encounter carries a story worth hearing, a potential connection worth nurturing, because in the end, kindness isn't just an act. It's the foundation of meaningful lives and unbreakable bonds, a principle that James and Lily embodied as they arrived home to the penthouse, sharing ice cream from a parlor on State Street, while planning future adventures, their laughter, a symphony of redemption that proved love's enduring power to change everything, leaving a legacy of inspiration for all who hear their story to carry forward in their own ways, practicing compassion daily to make the world a little brighter. One heartfelt gesture at a time in the heart of Chicago, or wherever life's paths may lead.